It might not work.
I don't know either. Just a thought.
Good morning. Apologize for tardiness. As some of you noted, the papers are warm, hot off the press. Printer was not cooperating this morning. Okay, Mr. Weatherford is out of town and will not be joining the meeting. Okay, we'll call to order. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So, we will start by entertaining a motion to approve the minutes. Why are they there? I don't think they're the right ones. These don't look right. The printer really messed up.
These are from September.
Yeah, these are from September. I know Rebecca Allen sent them to the board, but it's not in the packet, so we're gonna have to table the minutes and approve October and November and December. I apologize for that. Okay. So we'll move on to the treasurer's report. We have two invoices, one from our attorney and one from Miss Allen.
Yes. And we have one from Miss Allen for her administrative work for the month of October for 7 hours for $175.
On the previous page, the attorney.
The attorney.
Page 8.
I didn't know if you wanted to vote on the one. Just want to vote both.
Well,
at
we
the same
just told
time.
them both.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then we also have the attorney invoice for September. And for part of work in September and some work in October. It was for a total of $3,840.63.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the expenses for the month of September into October.
I'll make a motion to approve the two invoices as presented.
I'll second.
Miss Allen has the flu, so I asked her to stay home and take notes from there. So we will call for the vote.
Yes.
Good, yes.
Yes.
Perry, aye.
Miharis, yes.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes,
There were no TIF reimbursements.
there were not.
Also, I believe for informational, Miss Anderson, we have a couple of documents in there.
I'm going to go back for just a moment and make sure Marcus has been brought into the Zoom meeting. I can't see him yet.
Good. Is Marcus not in yet, Max? Archer?
No.
Go ahead.
Or Pamela Sprecher.
You think about it, that's right.
Thank you, Chair.
Mrs. Anderson, we have a couple of documents in here for informational purposes. I don't think it requires a vote of approval. It is what it is. So we did get a statement from Teller County through September 30th. Basically showing that we received a little bit more in tax funding of 1577.51. And the total for the year before treasurer fees is 715,680.16. On page 11. And I'm just reviewing it, but you can weigh in if you want, of course, Mrs. Anderson.
Yeah, no, I went through it exactly. So,
So page 11, this is the budget to actuals for 2022 so far. And we are, looks like 24% below budget. I'm reading it right.
correct.
And then on page 12, we basically have our debt service. And what it shows is for Bond 1, the 2008 series. Looks like we have this doesn't. I don't have our handicapped Mr. Basalati in the audience to help us with this. And he actually had broken it down for us in an easier way. Essentially, what we wanted to punctuate is that for Woodland Station, the district still owes the city of Woodland Park $550,000. And we have not made a payment on that this year to date. So we need to take care of that before the year, whatever that may be. We'll table this report because I am not flashing on Mr. Vasilati's interpretation of these tables. But basically, we have 2 bonds with Vectra, and we have the debt with the city. Sorry about that. Okay, moving on to legal. Max, can you let us know if Mr. McCaskill runs us?
He's in the meeting.
He's being promoted to panelist right now.
Okay, thanks for watching. We'll acknowledge him before we proceed forward. Mr. McCaskill?
He is slowly joining in now. He should be there now.
Okay, Mr. McCaskill.
Yes, to rejoin as a panelist, so just take him out. He's gonna join right
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, Chair Perry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We just wanted to make sure you were here.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yep, sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I had trouble running down the Zoom meeting link on the website, so.
It's hard to find.
Understood. Okay, so we are on 5, which is legal. I'll go through it and then give us a few minutes to kind of digest it. Woodland Sales contract, obviously, we've had one submitted by the Tava Group, and it's been in a holding pattern. The Woodland Station Development Agreement. The Tava Group attorneys submitted one to our attorney, and it had a cursory review. Mr. Neal and I had a meeting with our attorney actually yesterday and discussed, we were basically, what the Tava Group did, which made sense on the surface, was took the development agreement from Lot 1, which was the Woodland Hardware Store, and tried to edit it to fit into what we're trying to accomplish here. And unfortunately, it's not really apples to apples. And so after review by the attorney and discussion by Mr. Neal and I, we decided we probably should take a different approach. And I think where we landed on, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we do a standard form sales agreement, and then we do a memorandum for all the other items such as the assets on the property, such as any timelines, deadlines that the DDA wants to put on the project to ensure that we're doing the best job possible for our community. And a few other things maybe, but we believe the initial agreement from, I think, 2012, if I'm not mistaken, was overly complicated and hard to understand. And if it's hard to understand for the board, it's probably hard to understand for the city. And the attorneys are the only ones that win in that scenario. So our attempt now is to quickly go back and start from scratch, get the memorandum done and get it to this board for discussion, consideration, and hopefully approval. And so that's kind of where we're at. Any questions on that?
Did you want to discuss how we were trying to separate the complexity of the residential waiver?
No, I think we can address that a little further down unless you want to give more color, but I think let's go through and then we can have discussion because I do have that in the packet on page.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, and to your point, it's actually the first point in under city council. So during the applicant process with both parties, Tava Group and the other party, they made it clear that current market conditions called for some residential. Tava obviously always has wanted to build their commercial, but they also recognize the importance of residential, which is why they partnered up, at least initially, with David Weekley Homes. And the other group at first glance indicated they wanted to do all residential until they realized it was important to adding commercial. So they also changed their perspective, but also still recognize the importance of that. To that end, we are recommending to the DDA board to approve advancing the effort to remove the first floor requirement of commercial below residential. The updated environmental phase 1 and VCUP, which was performed by Matrix Design Engineering or Matrix Design Environmental back in the day, is being updated currently, and I'll give you more detail on that later, with a targeted delivery date of this Friday. If there are any restrictions or new environmental conditions which need to be satisfied, they will be revealed in this process. So basically what that's saying is that in our due diligence over the last couple of months, we've learned that the VCUP, which is basically stands for voluntary cleanup. It's a state process and mandate. The original report from Matrix Engineering was 538 pages. It is posted up to the DDA website under Woodland Station assets or documents. And the phase 1 environmental, both of those had expired. They usually have a lifeline of 10 years, I believe. And so once we discovered that, Tava took initiative to reach out to Matrix. It made sense to do that and see what it would take to get both of those documents updated. And before I tell you the amount they gave us, which I kind of fell out of my seat, I had asked Mr. Vassalotti with the city if he could give us a report in the history of the DDA on the money spent with Matrix Design Engineering / Environmental Services year to date. And that amount is $589,141.20. So that VCUP environmental process, along with other things that have happened throughout the years, was very expensive. And quite frankly, I kind of sunk in my chair when I realized that the VCUP was expired, because I had visions of hundreds of thousands of dollars floating in my head in terms of the dollar amount that Matrix would charge us to update it. Thankfully, they came back with an amount of $10,277.50 to update both the phase 1 environmental and the VCUP. That started effectively, the contract was signed October 7th. And that's why the report should be in hopefully this Friday. So, back to bullet point number 2, and we've had discussions with the city and don't necessarily disagree that, aspirationally, it would be nice to envision, and I think the DDA board in 2008, I think the comp plan, probably in 2010 and definitely in 2022, likes the idea of a little village with commercial underneath and residential up above. I think it's the belief of Tava, David Weekley Homes. My personal opinion that that is not supportable in the current market, and maybe even future market. Even if you go up in Vail and some other places, there's quite a bit of commercial that is still for lease. So the important thing there, of course, is I think there's a belief out there potentially by a few people that there has to be commercial on the first floor because residential cannot be on the first floor. It is not our belief that that's in the VCUP whatsoever, but the update this Friday should allow us to confirm that and reveal any other issues that they find here in 2022. Let's see.
Excuse me, Tony.
Yes,
So your plans are to amend the overlay district plan for the residential on upper floor zone. Is that where that's coming at? Is it the overlay district or is it?
yeah, it's the overlay district that the DDA board approved in like 2008. Yeah, so I'm getting to that. That's a good call out. So I'll go through that with you.
Can I point out one other thing? And I'm sorry to do this, but since we're discussing Woodland Station, I believe Mr. Maharis is involved with that.
Mhm.
Would you consider recusing yourself in this?
If the board feels I should recuse myself on these discussions, I can. I mean, there's information I can add that, and I'll recuse myself from any voting on the Woodland Station. But I'd like to be a resource for information like the form I filled out. If you guys have questions for things like that.
Yeah, my position, and Mr. McCaskill, please weigh in. I think one of the values of having Mr. Maharis on the board is his engineering background. And yes, he is one of the engineers for Tava Group, but as he discussed, he would not vote on any issues related to the Tava Group or Woodland Station. But I think from my perspective, I don't see a conflict of interest of him sharing his expertise to this board, which is why he was appointed in the first place. But Mr. McCaskill, do you have a weigh-in on Mr. Good's concern there?
Chair Perry, I would agree. I mean, I think it's clear that Mr. Maharis does have a conflict, and once there's an item before the board that would deal with approving the ultimate sale agreement or the TIF reimbursement agreement for a specific phase, given his relationship to the applicant, he should recuse himself. But to the extent the board is engaged in just general background discussions or information, I think having him participate as a member of the board is appropriate and probably helpful, right, to the overall discussions.
Thank you. Any other, does that make sense, Mr. Good?
Yeah, it does. I'm not trying to be voter.
I
I'm
know.
just trying to
No.
make sure things are.
I think, we all, including each of ourselves, have a responsibility to continually ask that question when it's appropriate. So thank you for asking the question, because I think we have clarification. Does any other board member have concerns with Mr. Maharis participating in the discussion and adding value to the discussion?
I would only ask that you not add to the discussion unless specifically asked questions, so that there is no chance of influencing any of our votes if we were to. come
And
up.
agreed, and I'll keep it to technical information.
Thank you.
Again, I mean,
Perfect.
civil engineers, my process for here.
So with that caveat, we'll kind of move forward. So a seller of the property, I believe that this expense related to updating the VCUP and the environmental phase one, it's appropriate in the normal course of business of negotiating between buying and selling parties. I think it's appropriate for this board to share in the cost of that update, which would be a total of $5,138.75. Does anyone have any concerns with sharing that as a 50% share cost on the updating that VCUP and environmental?
Bourne would move to approve the sharing of the cost of the phase one environmental and the VCUP in the amount of $5,138.75.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a first by Mr. Bourne, a second by Mr. Neal. So further discussion. So again, in my experience with doing a lot of contracts, property contracts, it's not unusual to share these kind of expenses. Frankly, I'm kind of disappointed in myself that I didn't catch it earlier this summer. I think getting through the 538 pages was kind of a victory for me because it's very technical, very difficult to navigate. But it was discovered, CAVA took action, and I support that. Are there any other comments or concerns?
I have a question.
Sure.
So in the slight chance that this would fall through the deal with the Tava House, would we own this VCUP? I mean, would it be ours to have in the future, or would Tava House own it?
I would say it's part of the public record once we submit it into this.
So it's not going to be a problem.
There is an ownership of it.
There's not an ownership. Okay. Okay.
And I think it was appropriate that we went back to the original engineering firm because we got the result we hoped for. I truly thought, once I learned that both of them had expired, I truly thought that it could kill the deal because the numbers would just be outrageous. But for whatever reason, they actually are pretty reasonable here. Any other comments or concerns?
Just the only thing I wanted to mention, Tony, is I had filled out the owner's portion of the VCUP, this 10-page questionnaire, which I left on the desk. That at some point, the board should review and determine who would, sign that or change that, whatever way they want.
Okay. So if I'm looking at this should be probably part of the sales process.
It's not part of the sale, it's part of the VCUP report to the state.
Okay,
There's an owner's questionnaire that consists of 10 questions that primarily the answer is to most of these that, yeah, per previous VCUP, this information was identified.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so the VCUP will need to be submitted to the state, correct? And so basically what you're saying, and what I think David is saying, is that he took the liberty of answering these questions that we would submit as the current owner of the property to the state with the VCUP update to make sure all the records are complete. I have no variances from the questionnaire is completed. Has everyone had a chance to look at it yet?
Does this document rise to the position that the attorney, our attorney should be involved? It's certainly from a FYI standpoint, but I didn't know if we needed to make a professional reflection on it. So that's more of a question than knowing what the answer would
And
be.
that's why we invited our attorney to participate this morning. Mr. McCaskill, you're not privy to it, but basically it's a phase 1 ESA client user questionnaire on matrix letterhead with 10 questions that one of us would need to execute to go with the D cup and the phase 1 environmental and be submitted to the state of Colorado for review. And it's not dissimilar than owner's
Like a property disclosure?
like a property disclosure. and-
It's that document's not in the packet, is that correct?
Say that again?
Is that document in the packet for this morning?
No, it is not.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'm happy to, if somebody wants to scan and email that to me or somehow get that to me, we can take a look at that and come up with the appropriate responses to the questions.
okay, I'll take responsibility for getting it to Mr. McCaskill yet today. And I don't think we have to take any action today pending attorney review and making sure that we're comfortable with the responses.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I don't think there's any time element.
I think we're trying to get that D cup submitted. Because I think even in your wording, you had the deadline when are they gonna resubmit, Mark? This week, this Friday?
Right. Okay, so I guess I'll amend my thought. So I would ask if the board is amenable or whether we need to vote that once the attorney has reviewed and sanctioned our responses, that you authorize the chair to execute the contract so that it can be submitted with the B cup if received on Friday. Does that seem appropriate, Mr. McCaskill?
Yeah, that does. It sounds like it'd just be a motion delegating authority to yourself as the chair to complete that document, right, and have it filed with the state.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to submit the questionnaire to our attorney, and once it has been reviewed and authorize the chair to execute the questionnaire, sign the questionnaire and submit it with the B cup once obtained.
That's a long motion. I can't remember it all, but I do make the motion.
Go for it.
Okay, so
I
Miss-
make a motion that our chair will submit the document to our attorney for approval and
Review and approval
review and approval
then execution.
and execution by the chair.
and execution by the chair.
I'll second that motion.
First by Mrs. Anderson, second by Mr. Neal. We'll call for the question.
Horn, yes.
Good, yes.
Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares recuse.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes.
So the last bullet point on page 14, and I might look to Karen for some help on this. After our discussion with the attorney yesterday, and given the timing of what we think we want to get accomplished, we would like to, I would like to entertain a motion to approve recommending removal of the commercial first floor requirement for residential buildings and advancing to the planning commission as the landowner. And then it goes to city council, I believe. But my question was, can we advance that request with Tava and the DDA being co-applicants? It may not be on.
Can't get it loose. There is definitely on the application form, signature lines for both the property owner as well as anyone else who wants to be listed as an applicant. So it's a matter of getting the folks on the right lines.
Okay, now, assuming that we start the process right away, because it does have to go through planning and city council, it's our understanding. Somewhere in that period, Tava becomes owner. Does that affect the application or can it continue to move forward?
I would say it can continue since they were already on the application. If anything, perhaps an additional letter to the file that just says they're, as owner, still supportive of the application continuing,
Okay.
if you want to be super careful.
Yeah, and for the DDA board, thank you, ma'am. I want to make it clear that this would be the DDA board recommending, as the property owner, working with the Tava Group, recommending removing that first floor requirement. It does require city planning review and approval and city council approval. So it's just us advancing that into the queue, so to speak. But sooner than later is important because based on my understanding of all the parties over the last several months, there are two things. One, the other parties that want to play in the sandbox, so to speak, want to see Tava break ground and they want to see that requirement removed. Otherwise, residential will not be tenable. So I think Tava, based on discussions, their position is if it doesn't get approved, they will continue advancing, adding more commercial as soon as possible. But the market definitely seems to be indicating residential. So I would recommend that as the current owner, that we apply with the Tava Group to get that requirement removed from the overlay district. Yes, Chair.
Okay, well, first off, I think, I disagree with that. I think that Woodland Station is our last holdout for business development in the core of downtown. I don't think that the market dictates that we should put housing there. And there's plenty of places for housing instead of the core of downtown. I think that the first floor requirement was for safety reasons and for the concept of the whole plan. I believe it was Joe Napoleon that pretty much designed this and came up with it a long time ago. The fact that it's more profitable for a developer, I don't think that should be weighing in our decisions. We're not here to make sure that it's the easy. What's best for the citizens of Woodland Park is to have a higher tax paying entity occupying that. And it should be a business hub, a recreational hub, a community hub downtown. If it's all a bunch of housing, we lose that flavor. And eventually the downtown will be just kind of it'll be lost. We'll lose our flavor. So I don't agree.
So I allowed you to talk out of turn. I apologize for that. I would entertain a motion to approve, I wrote it out.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion and then come back
Then
to
we can go back
discussion.
to discussion. Absolutely.
Thank you. I'd like to move to approve recommending the removal of the commercial first floor requirement from residential buildings and advancing to the planning commission as the landowner. Applicant is the DDA or as submission with co-applicant and it would probably be the co-applicant with Tava House Properties LLC and follow the city process.
Born seconds.
Okay, we have a first and a second. First by Mr. Neal, second by Mr. Bourne. Now we can continue the discussion. So other board members?
I just have a question. So Mr. Good made a comment about the first floor because of a safety issue. I'd like to understand what that means because I'm not aware, according to this report, that there is a safety issue. I don't know. what
Does
that
anyone
means.
want to answer that other than me?
Oh, I might reflect on that, Mr. Chairman. Many, many years ago, when the benzene plume was first located, there was a thought that the benzene fumes might penetrate into the first floor. And if it was residential, that was more risky than if it was commercial because of the intermittent nature of the people moving in and out of a commercial property. There was a thought then to express that there could be vapor remediation that could go on at the time of construction. But yes, it was a health risk concept at that particular time. How bona fide, don't know. But that was the thought. And that's where it comes from.
Any other thoughts? I think you probably actually read the B cup too, Killed Brain Cells. You've probably read it. Any other thoughts that you gleaned from that?
The only thing I'd state is in current discussions with Matrix, there are mitigative efforts that can be undertaken under that. So the previous V cup recommends vapor barriers, and there's also similar to like we all have for radon renovation in our house. It's the same type of thing that they would recommend for residential growth.
Mr. Chairman, one could also probably argue that if the point source of origination of the benzene has stopped over time, that plume may have also decreased in intensity. So it poses less of a risk today than it did many, many years ago.
Yeah, and if I'm remembering the map from the V cup, it kind of went primarily across the AmeriGas property.
Yeah.
And I think it will be interesting 10 years later, if you will, to get an update on the status of that. The bottom line, in my opinion, is that this board, definitely the city, will not allow anything to happen that's to the detriment of the health of the citizens. So we just have to wait and see the report. The remediation in the 538-page report was basically a vapor barrier around the foundation, I believe, if I'm recalling it properly. And some of the design elements I've seen over the last 6 months are potentially the first floor is garage. And so I think we have to wait and see, but rest assured, I have complete confidence that the city will make sure that there are requirements to protect the citizens. And I would also say that I'd like to point out that during the applicant process, there were some members of the board who first glance supported the other applicant doing 100% residential with no commercial until the DDA board made it clear there had to be commercial. So anyway, yes, Mr. Good.
Well, and following up on that, when was it DDA board wanting all residential?
I didn't say the DDA board. I said the other applicant, their first rendition to the
Gotcha.
DDA board was 100% residential, which you supported.
Which I supported.
Yes,
There was
it's on the
no
record.
100% commercial or residential that I've ever supported.
Okay.
But in any case, I think that if we're downplaying this flume, the safety issue, I think we might be making a mistake. I think it needs to be taken seriously. You look at Camp Lejeune right now, you can't open, you turn on your TV without hearing about it or online. So anyway, I think we'd be making a mistake if we just downplayed it.
I don't think we're downplaying it. I think we're getting an update to the V cup and the phase 1 environmental. We're going to see what the engineers who are putting their license on the line say. We will see what the requirements there are, if there are any, to remediate for safe and healthy health and safety reasons. And then obviously we as the DDA and the city can still weigh in on that once we understand it. So we're not downplaying it at all. I think we're taking it very seriously. I think Tavo took it very seriously by engaging them right away so that they didn't delay the process further. So, okay. So we have a first and a second regarding recommending removal of the commercial first floor requirement and putting an application in. I would suggest with the co-applicant to start the process with the city. So we have a first and a second. Any further comments?
I just would like to offer up, I had a conversation with our planning director just prior to the meeting. It was very short. We're not sure whether it would be a waiver request or an ordinance amendment. I would ask that on this vote, it would entail a
Either or.
flexibility of either or based on what the planning director finds out in her research.
I would concur that whatever the entitlement process requirement is what we have to rise to. Is that fair? So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion, concerns? And I do want to make it clear the DDA, in my opinion, board is not downplaying that potential risk. We're doing everything appropriate to make sure we understand the risk and mitigate the risk. Okay. So we'll call for the vote.
Born, yes.
Good, no.
Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mihatis recused.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Motion passes. Okay, on pages 15 through 17, I just wanted to show you basically the spreadsheet showing all the expenses to Matrix Design Engineering. I had heard throughout the years all kinds of different numbers, so I was very curious what that was. And as far as we know, it was 589, 141, 20. Pages 18, 19, 18 through. Basically 18 through 31 is the contract that Matrix assigned or that Tava engaged to get Matrix updating the V cup and the phase 1 environmental. I think we will ask our attorney to contemplate whether it's appropriate to have Tava Group assign this to us, or at least somehow put it on the record with the DDA as well, since we are sharing in the cost. And so I would like the attorney to think about that and give us a perspective when appropriate. You have any initial thoughts, Mr. McCaskill?
Chairman Neal, you're talking about the agreement with Matrix?
Right. Yeah, that Tava House entered into October 7th.
Right, for the just over $10,000.
Yeah, correct.
I think we just need I think we could just have a separate letter agreement, a side letter agreement with Tava House that basically confirms what you've already set forth in a motion that was approved earlier, which is that the DDA will pay half of will reimburse Tava House for up to 50% of the cost of those services. And then in that letter agreement, we can clarify that document, a copy would be provided to the DDA and will be part of the public record, right? Basically that the DDA will own that updated V cup report as well.
Okay. Can I get a consensus from the board that we authorize our attorney, Mr. McCaskill, to draft that letter? So, and allow the chair to execute it as soon as he has it prepared? Do we need to vote on it? I think we can have a consensus.
Consensus, I'm sure, but I'd like to see both partners say they're in agreement with that. Derek, you're okay.
Looks like we got, okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. McCaskill. So we're turning to page 34. We had tasked Mr. Gamelke to reach out to Ms. Larson to gather information on the contract agreement between the DDA and the Pass Historical Society that we agreed to months ago. And Mr. Gamelke, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Ms. Larson told Mr. Gamelke that she had provided the agreement to the city, and we checked with the city and they're not really aware of any contract agreement regarding, and basically what we're talking about is the cog rail the art stagecoach with respect to ownership, taking responsibility. We took it a step further and went to the Ute Pass Historical Society. Had a discussion with Mr. Blackburn, and there's kind of 3 people that primarily run that. It's all volunteer. Great group, and I hadn't been in the museum since Mr. Parkhurst was there, which is a long time ago. I used to be on our city council. It's a great little amenity for our community, so I encourage anyone out there to go. They had no knowledge of an agreement. They in fact said we have $0 to do anything. They're hoping to find money somewhere for asbestos mitigation on the baggage building that's over there in Bergstrom Park. And so, I think as a DDA, I admired the effort they put into that Ute Pass Historical Society. It's pretty cool. I'm motivated personally to try to figure out a way to help them find those funds to get the baggage car open. They want to turn it into another little museum. So I think in this process, we'll try to find some creative ways to maybe solve that for them in the community if we can. And they're not really even sure yet how much it's going to cost them. So I think we can add some value to helping them get organized. Anyway, so that contract is null and void, so the assets are still in play. I think last we left it in the original sales contract is Tava in ownership of the cog rail or the art piece. Tava is willing to relocate it with the crane if that is required or necessary, and I think we'll hear from that a little bit later based on this map I'm seeing in front of me. So Tava is willing to make sure that we honor Ms. Carter with the cog rail in a way that makes sense. Haven't had a chance to meet with Mr. Carter yet. He lives in the Springs, and we'll find a time where we can go down and meet him down there. It's easier for him based on his staff that talk to us. So that's still in play, and we still have to kind of figure that out. And let's see. Also, Secretary Anderson, she started research on urban renewal authorities, and she put a little primer in the packet here that you can kind of review and think about. Board member Warren requested sometime in the last couple of weeks that we somehow make it more clear to businesses in the district that if they're going to be doing some upgrades, it doesn't have to be ground up new buildings. If they're going to be doing some significant upgrades to their property, if we can establish a baseline and establish the improved value, there is an opportunity potentially that they would be eligible for a TIF deal. Do you want to opine on that any further?
Other than hoping to give the owners of the property or the current tenants an opportunity to perhaps expand the scope that they wish to do in terms of landscaping, parking, in terms of architectural design and implementation of, we'll say, a vision that would enhance the visual content of the town, in particularly the downtown marketing area.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, and I think we somehow need to get that message out there. I think there is precedent for a previous DDA board member that got a TIF deal after the fact. It's my opinion only, that you had a great value to your 2 buildings, and unfortunately at this point that ship has sailed, in my opinion. But we do want to get the word out to any future enhancements. It is part of our charter, if you will, to add value to the downtown. So we want to get the word out that if you're contemplating a major improvement, we probably should talk sooner than later and see if we can establish that baseline and go from there. Is that fair for everyone?
Yeah, and I would just expand on that. I've been involved as a civil engineer on 2 projects recently in the corridor that we're unaware of the DDA deal. So I think one of them sailed, which would be Jake's Cigar Lounge. But I believe AJ's Pizza going in the old Pizza Hut building is going to come present something to us next month
Okay,
with their improvements to that building, which was Langley Architecture. A huge improvement over the previous building.
okay, so we'll have to, you think they're gonna submit something?
Yeah, they don't have a lot of information yet, but I've tried to explain to them the process, and I wanted them to come in and discuss with the board, and then we can work an agreement from there or no agreement.
Yeah, so I guess the question for the, oh, yes.
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Warren.
The one thing that I might mention and to caution potential people who might want to participate in something like that is that the TIF is usually not granted until after the construction has been complete. It has gone through the county appraisal process and property tax assessed to that increment that's greater in value. So the money is not there immediately to do the improvement, but it would be down the road at some point.
Correct.
So
And
there is that delay.
And I understood that, and I
Yeah.
think they understand that. I think that the goal, I think, for this to work seamlessly for us is for have people at the beginning of their, development of a project to come to us and discuss items that may be considered for a TIF deal.
Sure.
I think a lot of folks are hearing about it after the fact, and then, somebody tells them about this and then they come in. But it'd be great to have some participation in that process so that everybody's clear moving forward.
I guess what I would ask is, Mr. Warren, Mr. Good, we've been parsing through, looking at all previous TIF agreements and different ways that we've done it as a DDA board, because whether we like it or not, we're accountable for the past, and then future boards are accountable to, we're making them accountable to us. So I guess I guess in my mind, I had said, okay, if the ship is already sailed and they're complete, they're not eligible, but how about this scenario where it's in process? What, has there been any discussion of that in the past? I don't recall that.
Well, when I first signed up for this gig, we had a meeting kind of teaching us how it all worked. And my question at that time, it was David Buttery given the little mini course, and was, well, if everybody's receiving a TIF, who's paying the taxes? And all the new businesses coming into town, are they all of them expected to get a TIF? And he said, no, that won't work. That you have to, if it's redundant, if it's not a benefit, there's a lot of criteria that I think should be considered. And it's a discussion that we need as a board to kind of agree on, that not everybody that applies for a TIF should be eligible to get one.
Yeah, I think the thing I do recall is Ms. Carrick and Mr. Warren laying out a pretty good process for that, if I'm not mistaken. I think the weighing factor from my perspective, because I don't want to, even in my profession, we don't try to pick winners and losers. I think we set forth the criteria, and if it checks those boxes, then we consider it. So I think we need to pull that document out and dust it off and get this board aware of it and see if we're in concurrence with that direction and conclusion. We can be better prepared to weigh in on TIF deals.
I agree, because that kind of sounds like it could lead to favoritism and nepotism. And that's a little bit scary.
Yeah, but it's
Being
also-
laid out the way that he just said it. Because then it's like, well, it just, I think there needs to be a set standard, like Tony said, and that we need to get that out and look at it, and then we need to adhere to that. I hear what you're saying, but that sounds pretty,
there's some,
it's business. I get it, but
Sure.
it doesn't sound good. It sounds like it's ripe for favoritism and nepotism.
There is some verbiage already out there, and I'm not sure where to find it, or do I recall it all, but it is out there.
I think we should look
stating
at
our
that for sure.
purpose for a TIF agreement.
Well-
It's already out there.
And let's make sure, there's actually Grace at the city had turned us on late last week to a meeting in Pueblo regarding TIFs. I think it was too late for us to engage. I really tried, but I couldn't make it either. So we're going to look for another resource there. But remember, the whole concept of the TIF is if there's a increase in value, basically now there is an increase in taxes. And so that delta, the differential between the baseline and the improvement, becomes what's available for TIF. And so when you say who's paying for it, they are. The theory is that they're paying in advance for these improvements for that they may not have done without the TIF, or maybe not. A Natural Grocers is going to build it either way. But that's what we're really talking about. So they're getting reimbursed for a value that maybe wouldn't have been there without they're moving forward on improving the property. If that makes sense. So they're paying for it. It's just a matter of whether they're getting a reimbursement back for a period of time before they're paying that tax into the future. Is that fair? I mean, that's as simple as I can. think of it.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's valuable, what John was saying, to come up with some criteria, whether it's, some level of light that we're cleaning up, or it's public improvements that benefit, other businesses downtown, or it's purely aesthetic landscaping and, more expensive architecture, whatever. But I think we need to establish those criteria, not just say it's on a case. I mean, it is a case by case basis, but there has to be criteria that goes along with that. Judge.
I think I ran across Mr. Bourne and Miss Carrick's work months ago when I was looking through documents.
Yeah, we still have that, and that's still in existence. I think one of the overriding concepts quite some time ago was that TIF was, for existing businesses, was to perhaps encourage, it's an incentive to encourage the people to do more than what their budget would allow at that given moment in time, and also to benefit the community infrastructure as a whole. Not just add to the bottom line for the financial success of that operation.
So
There's got to be a value to the general community too.
we'll get your work and get it distributed out to everyone as soon as possible, so you can think about it, contemplate it, understand it, and then we can decide if it's still valid or if we need to tweak it or
Sure.
whatever. So, but I think let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage the work you guys already did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a quick comment on the URA information. You don't have to form the URA. If you have a DDA in place, it can
Right.
function the same way.
And that's an important distinction. You're correct. Yeah. Yeah, so please read the documents you provided, because that and the brownfields with FSU, I suspect with holidays coming up and us trying to get this TIF agreement done, or not TIF agreement, but these contracts done, that in the new year, our focus will turn to looking for grants and uncovering every rock we can. Okay, already mentioned that. Okay. So Mr. Weatherford informed me he wasn't going to be at the meeting. He also told me that last week he met with the city to start the process of bringing his 2 properties into the overlay district. Originally, his property, formerly known as AmeriGas, was in the district, and when he went sideways with our board, he pulled it out, or requested to pull it out, and so he was accommodated. And so, we don't own the property. As a matter of fact, when I'm looking at this map, I'm seeing that Tava is saying it's possibly for future commercial and residential development, and I'm suspecting you're going to explain that a little further. My position is that, there's no downside to the DDA supporting his moving the properties into the district, because I think any adjacent property that's brought into the district and has to be consistent with hopefully what we're gonna be doing on Woodland Station. There's no downside to that. We're not the property owners. We're not gonna be part of the process. That's Mr. Weatherford that has to get that done. So we can decide not to weigh in, or we could just say that we have no objection from the DDA board perspective for any adjacent property owner to go into the overlay district. Thoughts?
I would, my thoughts are, it's up to them to do it. We wouldn't object to anybody. So it's kind of like, we're gonna just stand on the sideline and watch. It's
We're
kinda
completely
nice.
on the side.
Yeah.
Correct.
Continue on the sideline and
But I
we
guess
don't
what
object.
I'm trying to get at is, if there are any objections, let's get it on the record so that the city's aware. Whoever, I don't even know who's involved in the approval of that process, frankly. I haven't had time to look at that or talk to Karen about it. But are there, we're on the sidelines, we have no say in it. I can see potential value for it being in the same kind of criteria, but the city's gonna drive that anyway. We do have a design review committee, but we've decided that we are the whole board is the design review committee. So final stuff, we'll get to weigh in a little bit, but the city really drives those processes. We're not gonna deviate from city requirements, in my opinion. So, yes, sir.
So does anybody know why Mr. Weatherford pulled out his property from the overlay district to begin with?
Frankly, Mr. Good, my approach with Mr. Weatherford is I don't want to talk about the past. I want to move forward. And so I'm sure there's a reason there. I'm sure it was given at the time. I don't even care or even know. We're talking about today moving forward, and whether this, we're on the sideline, we really don't weigh in. He has to get the process done or not done. That's on him, but I don't see that. I think we basically support his efforts, and we have no objection, in my opinion.
Just a point of clarification from Karen. If, someone's already proposing a modification to that district with, lower level residential, is it the same process if Art was trying to add this and amend the district boundaries? And should those be, I'd hate to have, planning commission and council looking at two separate modifications to one district at one time.
They're both technically zone changes. One is where you're changing the boundary of the overlay zone district. The other one is where you're wanting to change the text associated with the code and the standards for the zone district.
Mhm.
So they're both be processed as a zone change application.
And you're okay with those being separate applications? Because I don't know how much the Tava group is involved with Arden's.
Yes, I'm comfortable with them being separate, especially since one is a map amendment, the other one is a text amendment.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think so I guess, I don't think we necessarily need a motion, just a consensus that we don't object to Mr. Weatherford moving forward in his process. We can't stop him, but, again, I can see value in his properties being brought into the district if they're brought online at some point in the future.
So, Tony, can I ask, would that mean he receives utilities and stuff, infrastructure support from this? So I see it being a big advantage for him, not so much for the.
Well, theoretically, he's in the DDA district. He can come and request a TIF deal on any future improvements. I don't know. The only value I see is maybe some consistency with what's going to happen on Woodland Station relative to the adjacent properties. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball on that. But
And I think, Jerry, that he would have to, his site's kind of surrounded by utilities. Any developer on any site is, has city utilities available to them if they're in the city boundaries, but they have to pay to bring those utilities to their site. Whether the board offers him some TIF deal for doing that, that's at the discretion of the board.
yeah, I think frankly, from my perspective, it's early in that process. Yes.
An example of where TIF might help, and we'll say, and we'll just pick the water line. If in the fact that the property under discussion has to bring in some water line, which is appropriate, but if that now can be extended and bringing better flow, putting in circulating type systems, then it benefits a whole bunch of other property owners in the area. That now is a benefit where TIF could be potentially applied, because it's benefiting a lot more than just that owner. In that same thing, such as if the owner of the property only needed a 6-inch line, but an 8-inch line would serve the people, there's an area that could help. Well, that's the kind of public improvement that goes on with
to
TIF.
come down. in the future, yeah. So do we have a consensus that, I mean, obviously it's his business, see what happens, but we have no real objection as a board.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. We'll put on the record, Mr. Good has an objection to the theory of what Mr. Weatherford can do with this property. Okay, so we're going to move on to a update from the Tava group, which is the most fun part of the meeting for me. I have 2 board members that are going to take care of some personal stuff. Or one at least. Marcus, we'll send you this. Looks like they're presenting kind of a. Wrong. And Mr. Mark Weaver is at the mic.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. Right, this is the fun part. Let me give you a quick update on things that have been accomplished in the last month. You've already seen the first draft of the AD, we call it the ADD, Acquisition Development document. And we're gonna adjust that and simplify it. But we got that turned into you guys, I believe it was earlier last week. The phase 1 should be done and ready by this Friday, which is great. They moved on it relatively fast. Sometimes these phase 1s can take 6 weeks, and they did it in just a few weeks. So it's great. We're going to talk about the site plan here in just a second. And we've had conversations with, so there's a lot of other players and stakeholders in this whole adventure. So we've had conversations with Vector Bank. We need to know where they stand on some of their property. We've had conversations with the city of Woodland Park about their little parcel that's just south of the AmeriGas property. So we have gotten input from most of the adjacent property owners. One we haven't talked to yet is with Woodland Hardware, Mr. Rodarmal. We'll see if there's going to be some participation in what we're planning here, but for now we haven't talked to him. Okay, so let's look at the site plan. So this is probably our 6th or 7th iteration of what we are proposing. This is not in concrete. This has not been determined and settled on. It's just for discussion purposes to show you what we're thinking. Before we dive into the particulars of it, the overall context of what we're trying to do here, we want to acquire the property, we want to get going on the commercial, and we want to work with people that'll do the residential component. It's important for Tava House, the restaurant itself. The opening date for that is important. We got to hit it in the spring of 2024 so that we hit the summer season and we're off and running. Therefore, working backwards from that, we need to get a shovel in the ground by April or May. I'm looking at Karen to say, let's try to get there. So we're starting all the entitlement work from that point back to where we are today. So That's our priority, is to get this Tava House component into the city for the entitlement process, so we can break ground in April or May. So to that will be our first shovel in the ground process and project. What you see in the blue is the Tava House. That's going to be the Tava House, the culinary school, the event center. All that is in that space that you see there. We're still working on the parking and the access and that sort of thing. We're still playing around with that to see how it flows best. Then the next part will be that you see the kind of like 10, it's items. It's not in, okay. It's those two, the future retail and the future climbing gym. Those are in the future when those users are ready to present and to come forward with their projects. Probably the climbing gym is going to be moving forward with their process. They're in their planning stages to work on that. So we'll have those two projects in the future. You see the green space in the middle, which will be like this open space gathering area. It'll be right out the door of the Tava House. In the plan, you see there's different stairways, there's different access, there's ADA access, and it all flows with a gathering place for people to come and eat and have events, other retail. The bouldering gym, climbing gym just adds another component of interest to people. So that's the commercial portion that you see right there. Any questions about that part before I talk about the others?
I have a quick
Yeah,
question.
please.
On the future retail, is that
Mhm.
just going to be a empty building, and then as businesses want to come in there, you'll work with them on what they need and how much space they need?
Yeah, then what we'll do is we'll see what the market wants and we'll build that structure, and it's going to be complementary with what we want to see here. So it's probably going to be some form of hospitality or restaurant, general retail that will fit in this. It's not all that big because we want to be careful about what the market will bear. But that's what it'll be, some concept like that in the future.
Will it be one story or 2 story?
Great question. So what we're thinking is, and this is where our civil engineer might want to chime in on this. So that you see the southern side of that future retail, that's going to be walk out straight onto Saddle Club Avenue. So you're going to walk right out. You'll park there and you walk out. Up above is space for sitting out in the sun and gathering in that area that will be dedicated to that tenant. So that's what those staircases
So
are.
not open to the public, dedicated to the tenant for their use?
Yeah, but it's all going to be connected with that open space.
Yeah, so John, it's a walkout scenario where our intent is to have a more impressive frontage down on the street section. So the
Yeah.
2-story frontage down there. But then that upper level, including most of the greenscape, will tie into the lower level of Tava House at that upper level. So
Nice.
there's kind of integration of that blockway patios.
So you'll kind of be able to
Green
see over it
space.
even then and kind of look out over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Gamelki, that's there.
I was
Ryan,
wondering because of the landscape that you.
right. So the architects have this great 3D rendering that they've done that we can show you. That, and it's so you're standing, there's the peak,
Mhm.
you're at Tava, you're looking straight across that open space and then the top of these
Yeah.
future retail.
So the top of those future retail will become part of the open space.
Correct.
It's
The
the same
upper
level.
floor, yeah, it's the
Correct.
same level as the. open
That's a
space.
cool
It's
concept.
Yeah. It's going to look, it looks great when we saw it the other
A lot
day.
of dirt.
So you think you could have 1 or 2 businesses in there?
2 or 3,
2 or 3?
probably.
Are you worried about if I know
Please.
you said possible future restaurant, wouldn't that be a little bit conflicting for the Tava House?
No, we believe in the more the better. The concepts you want that bring people to, we're trying to get them to this space right here. And we are open to any other restaurant or bar or anything like that. So that's the commercial. You see the southern portion, so south of Saddle Club Avenue. That's the future residential. That is David Weekley. So we've got a signed LOI with David Weekley to work on this. They've got some due diligence that they want to perform that has to do with studies about market demand. The V cup, the plume, all that, they need to know about that in detail. And then how this all fits with not only this 6.63 acres, but the adjacent properties to the west. So that's where Mr. Weatherford, his properties come into play with what David Weekley wants to do. So we're waiting. Where it is now is David Weekley has said, we want to see that V cup. We want to see that phase one. Let's see that and make sure there's nothing too scary in it. And once they know that, then they can start spending a lot of money on their plans and working with Mr. Weatherford. So that's that portion. Yep.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is, and I think this was clear throughout the applicant process, is Kava House Properties focus is taking responsibility for the 6.3 acres.
Yes.
And whether it's David Weekley or some other party, you're taking responsibility for getting that developed. And then anything adjacent, you're not playing in that sandbox. It's another party.
Correct.
fair?
We don't have any control over it at this stage. We want it integrated into this, absolutely, but we are not prepared to take down all that Mr. Weatherford property and try to pull it in right now.
And the only caveat to our initial discussions is there seemed to be some interest in maybe thinking about some upgrades to Bergstrom Park.
Yes.
So if you can cover that, because that's interesting.
You bet. So look up there at the top, that northern portion, that's where Bergstrom Park is. And we've had a lot of conversations about this parcel, this portion. We want to keep that parking if we can. We think that's going to be important for the overall Woodland Station. The existing bathrooms that are there and that structure is quite large for what it does. And we want to repurpose that, redesign it and move it or downsize it so that it opens up visibility from Highway 24 into the development. We want to keep the cog in there. So you see it on the far west side of the circle. We want to try to keep that circle incorporated with the cog car, keep the baggage car, downsize the bathrooms and keep the parking. That's what we're thinking here. And we've looked at a lot of different models, but we think the cog, that's a good place for it. We want to keep the baggage car. And if we reimagine the circle, that could be like a great gathering spot for people, pictures, looking down into the project. It just lends a lot of appeal for people to gather up there.
So it's not something you would drive in, obviously, then, so it's a
No.
walking. area.
Walk into it. And remember, on the south side, as you look at this top portion where Bergstrom Park is, remember there's a walkway that goes along between the parking lot and Tava House. So we want to connect that to the trail system. We can either do it, see how it's shown down here in the southern portion where there's residential. We're trying to determine what works good for the development and the city wanting to have a trail go through here. So we're trying to determine if it goes right through the southern portion or do we connect it up through the top at Bergstrom Alley? And that's more conversations with the city and hearing what they want and where they'd like to see it placed.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
I'm fuzzy on the restroom part.
Yes, sir.
that You were talking about.
Yes, sir.
That's the Woodland Station, right? I mean, the city owns that? Is that
They do.
correct? And they're agreeing to lower the roof line on that? Is that what you were saying? And why do you want to do that again?
It has to do with visibility.
Yeah, so, Mr. Lawson, maybe perhaps to discuss. I would say that Bergstrom Park, based on all the discussions, I'll let, of course, Mr. Lawson speak for himself, but what I've learned is currently it's a state designated rest area, which from my perspective, we should take efforts to deselect it as a state rest area, like it's been happening around the state for the same reasons. If it's a state rest area, it has to be open 24 hours. The city just had to succumb to taking the bathroom stall doors off and putting up curtains because of vandalism. And so if it's not a rest area, then it can be closed down at a proper time that's reasonable for use by the public. And I think what I'm hearing you say as a first shot at
Yep.
discussion,
Yep.
nothing's in stone, is that obviously Tata is responsible for moving the cog somewhere. That makes sense. It sounds like you're willing to improve the roundabout thingy that everyone hates in some way or fashion. With the baggage car, as I met with the UPass Historical Society, I personally will probably work with them to help them find the funds to
Okay.
mitigate that asbestos so that they can make it a museum and an amenity to the area. And then the rest areas, if it's not a rest, the bathrooms, if it's not a rest area, I think what I'm hearing you say is you're willing to put some money into improving that, updating it, upgrading it for a couple of purposes. One, it needs it. Two, your goal would be to improve visibility down into the corridor. Is that fair? Into the center?
Yeah, that's great. Mr. Perry, thank you. The bathrooms, we think are important to the overall development because it's a public restroom. We think that's important to keep that in there somewhere. If you would look at it, it's just so large and wide that we think that could be shrunk down to something smaller that's doesn't have such a high roof line, which blocks visibility, that sort of thing.
And if I may,
Please.
we've had
Mr. Lawson.
we've had some very preliminary conversations with the Tava House group about what role can Bergstrom Park play in the greater development. We've talked just very high level about, the city would be open to the conversation. Let us know what you got in mind. The roof, this is the first I'm hearing about the roof line conversation, but there is a more holistic conversation about what does that look like. And so, nothing's been set in stone. There's no agreement. We haven't seen renderings either. But again, can it be incorporated into a larger development? But we're talking about it. That's as far as it's gone.
Yeah, my perspective is we have our chance to talk about it now, otherwise the ship is sailing. Is that fair?
Yep. We want your input, your ideas, and probably would be helpful at the December meeting is to have some renderings that you guys can look at and consider. So that's very helpful to see that the visual representation of that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Gamel,
Is a circle, is that the circle that already exists that's there?
The number 10.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
so then, but who owns that?
The
city. Or is this the first time you saw that the possibility of the cog rail car going there as well?
That's the first time I've seen the cog car there. However, again, the whole facility has been part of the preliminary conversation. How could that space be better utilized?
Yeah, no, I like it, but so this whole part right here is just a dream then, or a concept like you said, but it
Yes, sir.
really needs to be ironed out with the city then before it can be approved, correct? Not with us. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're still a long ways from a final site plan.
Yeah.
Conceptual.
I like it though. I like the fact that you're willing to play with the cog car and keep it in there. I think that bodes well with the city and some of the people. I think it's good.
It's a good fit in it. You've got a cog car, a baggage building, some restrooms, parking, and space to look at the peak.
Yeah.
That all kind of fits. And then it's encouraging for people to maybe stop for that. And then they see the rest of the development down there. And yes, sir, that all kind of fits.
Yeah, even the angle of it is good because it's less to look through, like you said,
Exactly.
you can look by it easier.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's very visible from the road. It's good.
Well, and, you know, I think it's great Kava's considering this. I think it's great the city's open, so yeah, I agree. You need to have more discussions with the city. My research on Mr. Bergstrom is a former resident who gave this property to the city. He basically wanted it for benefit of the citizens of Woodland Park. And so I think anything to keep it updated and approved would be great. And if it fits in with the overall master plan and you're willing to put some additional dollars to that, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So
Chair Barrett.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mark, did
Yes, sir.
you actually, is number 11 drawn to scale?
You know, I'm assuming it is.
Because I actually took a tape measure and measured.
Oh, you did?
The diameter of 10 and the length of the track that the car sits on.
Yeah, so it doesn't fit.
It's
does it?
about, well, it would fit diagonally. I would ask you to take a look at it. I'm not sure at the angle that it is presented on this diagram. It's factoring in the train tracks that it sits
Oh.
upon.
Right.
The car itself looks about right, but the tracks that support it.
Yeah.
And then the other I just asked, please take a look and
Yes,
factor
sir.
that in. The bench, the Tava bench, would you be relocating it? The one that sits right in the center of number 10? There's some history behind it. Would you
Oh.
be incorporating that, sliding it over or something?
Yes.
Okay, because there is Ute Indian relationship with it. If you look at the history of that bench,
Mhm.
I didn't realize it. I thought it was just a bench, but there is some historical tie-ins that
Oh.
we should look at.
Yeah,
moving
Mr.
that
Neal,
over a
so it's
little bit.
that, I recognize what you're talking about now. Yeah, it's right
Yeah.
there in the middle of the circle.
Correct. Now, at one time, there was a time capsule there. I think it's long been moved, but the bench still has some Ute Indian. I think you should do a little research on that.
So if we can incorporate the cog car, the baggage building, the Ute Indians, if we can get that to flow right, that'd be great.
Well, in your original application, you also talked about a historical element with regards to the saddle club and the rodeo that used to be there. 'Cause, I saw that in your initial application, so keep that in mind too. And I did reach out and connect with Celinda Kalen. They live in Taos now. She's actually a member of the Ute tribe, and she was the authoritative expert up here until they moved. She ran the Pikes Peak Historical Society out in Forest. So she's willing to collaborate if necessary to make sure it's done properly and with respect. So
this could be a great stopping point for the history of this area.
It could be, yeah.
And it's in one place that would draw a fair bit of visitors. Okay, yeah. All right.
yeah, I love the idea of leveling that down.
Yeah.
And putting those elements in place, and I suspect even with the length, there's gonna, even if it's angled, from Mr. Carter's perspective, it's gonna be more visible than ever, which I think hopefully would satisfy his requirement or desire in the process. Yes, sir.
And another note for the bathrooms, we've done some preliminary looking into that. It doesn't seem we have any solid agreement to keep those restrooms there as part of the rest area. We don't receive any compensation from the state for that. And so that could, it seems right now, and we want to dig deeper into it, that may also be negotiable if we wanted to do it. No doubt it's an anchor, pulling people off the highway.
Yeah.
But certainly I'd encourage folks to keep that in mind as well. There doesn't seem to be legal reasons to keep it there.
Yeah, I think when it was more sparse up here and people were driving through, it was convenient to stop and use the restroom, but I think now it's, if it could become an amenity to the downtown for all the businesses, not
Yep.
just Woodland Station, because people stopping and walking the streets can see the restroom and get to it. And if we're improving it and maintaining it and able to lock it up to minimize the vandalism, I think that's a big plus. So
Is it open all the time?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay,
We
24 hours.
have intermittently locked it overnight. It's kind of a challenging thing. There's a larger story to it,
Huh.
but again, we'd be open for changes.
No, I just want, my question is, so the city would still maintain that, even if the Tava House did the improvements, the city would still be responsible for maintaining the restroom in that area?
If Tava House wanted to take that over. if it was incorporated into the design,
I'll let you take run with
excellent.
that.
Otherwise, yes, we would. still
Okay.
maintain it.
But Michael, there's probably some credence to redevelopment of that up to a more current standard, like the Memorial Park restrooms or something that it's a little more bulletproof than that older building.
That was a conversation we were having just the other day, Kip and I. Absolutely.
Mm.
any
Okay.
other comments from,
No, I'm done. That's my presentation.
any questions from the board? Any additional? Yes, sir.
Please.
So we talked in the past of a more detailed plan. Would we expect it to be more updated before we vote on this,
Um,
more detailed?
We'll go over this with you, the commercial portion in the Bergstrom Park in more detail, but we don't have any future details about the residential at this time.
Yeah, so, they're spending money already. So we'll be talking about getting the agreements done, and then they will have to go through the entitlement process with the city. And yes, we will have an opportunity to vote on the final site plan and the details of everything.
So we'll make our decision pretty much based on the Tava House, right? That's all that's really slated.
That is what we know for today that's getting going, which is significant. Going from a zero tax base to their build costs. So that delta is pretty significant and tax base to the city. So you're correct.
And what about infrastructure? Do we have the kind of a ballpark, where the cap might be on that or?
Until they need to, sooner than later, we need to get them ownership so that they can sit with the city and start meeting with CDOT like yesterday. So until they understand CDOT, until they understand what they're going to do with the drainage down here, which is bigger discussions with the probably David Weekly as part of the concept. I think we're going to see initial numbers on infrastructure required to do Tava House, maybe the bouldering gym, if we're fortunate to get that rolling right away. I see this if it's rolling out in spring of 2024. Hopefully that's towards the end of the recession we're about to go through pretty deeply, in my personal opinion. So yeah, they'll bring us some of those numbers, but you're exactly right. We're starting with an anchor commercial piece, which is what got David Weekly interested, which is what's making this possible to actually start doing something on Woodland Station for the first time in 21 years. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, I don't see why we can't come up with some kind of a number. And I think you can talk to CDOT without actually owning it, can't you? If that were.
Here's what I will say is that right now CDOT's having some changeover. It's most important for our community that the city of Woodland Park, Teller County establish new strong relationships with CDOT. The best pathway for any development is through the city to CDOT, with the city sitting at the table advocating for the applicant. And so that's a relationship process, and it just doesn't work that way in the real world. That's why Tava and the city need to be sitting down with CDOT as soon as possible.
Yeah, I just, in representing the citizens of this community, think that would be irresponsible if we just had no cap on it. I think that we need to have a number
So remember, Jerry, in the interest of the citizens, at some point, the numbers would be codified and we get to decide on the TIF agreement. We get to vote on that. So that's the point where we delineate that for the citizens of Woodland Park. I'm not going to ask for numbers that are pie in the sky. This is a very arduous process that they're about to undertake with CDOT. And it is what it is. Every developer, every builder's had to go through it. And hopefully CDOT will be amenable. And I think there's some decisions that, in my opinion, I believe David Weekley's waiting to know that Tava House is a go. Because when I met with them, that first meeting, that was what made them very interested in doing this project. So where they place the access points could affect CDOT requirements. And so there's a lot of moving parts there that they have to figure out and convince us that it makes sense. And then we have to agree to whatever TIF deal makes sense. So we get to weigh in.
Yeah.
And I'm as interested as protecting the citizens as you are. So I think everyone up here is.
Yeah.
We're trying to do our best to do the job.
And just remind the board, our responsibility is to the businesses, the DDA, the city council's responsibility is to the citizens. So please keep that in mind when you say you're representing the citizens. We represent businesses sitting on the DDA board. Council represents citizens. It's in our charters.
Okay, first of all, any audience participation? Of course. Go ahead, Karen, let's let you speak
Yeah,
first.
thank you. Since it came up a couple of times, the baggage building, I just wanted to highlight that we actually have obtained the services of an asbestos abatement contractor. They will be starting work before the end of the month.
From the city side?
Well, it's a combination of funds. Some of it's city, some of it is a grant from Newmont Mine, which we're
Okay.
very grateful to have received. And there is $3,500 that is coming from the DDA.
That's what I
towards that
thought we
project.
voted
Yeah,
on.
we did. vote on
Yeah.
that.
So the good news is we've got somebody who
Abatements.
is going to be starting work here before the end of November.
And I don't remember, do we have the total cost yet? Approximately.
From memory, it's, it went up and we've managed to find somebody else. We're at about 12,006.
12.
And how much are we short?
Yes.
Do you know?
I think within the HPC budget for the year, there was funds to cover that last little bit.
So with our contribution, the city's contribution, we should make it happen.
We should be okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, and it was just over 12. I want to say it's 12.6.
That's good stuff.
Thanks.
And Karen, following up on that, hasn't Langley completed some of the interior architecture revisions that are proposed? I don't know how far down the line, but is there a time frame for any, bringing that building into service?
We do not have a time frame, and I understand he has done some work, but I also understood that there's some updates that need to happen to the MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing sets. And at the moment, don't have firm funding in place to tackle any of that. And the Historic Preservation Committee is going to potentially look to the state, History Colorado, for other grant opportunities. And if we find something there, we may be looking for some matching funds. So.
And I was confused from the beginning, the differentiation between the Historic Preservation Committee, which is under the city, and the UPass Historical Society. Who do you expect to put in the materials and to staff that building when they open it?
I have no idea.
Okay, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, it seemed like they would be willing, but that was just a cursory conversation with them to put historical things in there to make it interesting.
Well, and only having a 10-month tenure with the city of Woodland Park, I just have no idea what past conversations might have been
Right.
or conversations and thoughts were around any of that. So I
Yeah.
just don't have that information.
Yeah, where I came to is we just have to start talking now and get it figured out. Because it's murky on previous conversations.
Well, and from the Historic Preservation Committee perspective, getting the asbestos taken care of was, as Lori Gloff, the chair likes to say, the long pole in the tent.
Yeah.
Without that, nothing else was going to be lining up after that.
Correct.
And I was on the Historical Preservation Committee as the liaison when we did the budgets for last year And all of that funding was for phase one is what we talked about, which was the asbestos remediation. Phase two, which was the creation of the museum inside of it, there was no funding. It was just a to-do. The long, as Karen said, the long pole in the tent was getting it taken care of, the asbestos taken care of.
So John reminded us of the 3,500 we approved. I assume we haven't cut the check yet.
I think we
I don't
did.
think we
didn't
have
we?
yet.
I don't think I saw
I
it in
don't
the
think I've
budget.
seen it come across. Yeah.
I need to check with our
There.
finance director. but
Yeah, so I
know it's
guess-
clearly budgeted.
Yeah.
That's what I've always.
It
Yes.
was
told.
budgeted 3,500 here, city 3,500, and Newman Mine did give us the $5,000 already.
Yeah, so Rebecca and I will work with Mr. Vassalotti and probably advance that in December meeting so we can get that funded this year. Thanks for the reminder, John. Okay, Ms. Betterman, can you give us 3 minutes after we're on to a meeting all the way up at the county next?
I'll take one.
Oh, even better. Thank you.
So authority members, thank you for hearing me. My name is Deanne Betterman, and I've lived here for 20 years. I'm a retired nurse. I drove 12 years down the pass to go to work. My heart sinks when you say you're not going to have commercial underneath residential, because I haven't told any of my friends, but I'm going to sell my house and buy one of those places with a beautiful view. But I would like to have someone make me breakfast downstairs at the bottom. And I would like my hairdresser there and my podiatrist. And I'm thinking too about a vision of the city with 4,000 more people coming. And if you make that all residential, which also seems to be in favor of the Tava business and not in favor of the rest of the town, because it could be such a cute town. Also, if Forge had that same idea, now Tava is going to have the same idea as the previous applicants. So I would really encourage you. My heart is into small businesses. And if I have some women who would like to rent one of those spaces to start their business, this is to me what the future is. I would like the bottom level to be all commercial, if we could do that. And I'm thinking about our future and about myself personally. Thank you.
Did you get a map from
No.
them for today's? I'll give you mine.
Okay.
We have one here.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks for your comments, and I would encourage you that we're advancing it through the process, and so you'll have a
Okay.
chance to talk at city, planning commission and probably city
Okay.
council.
And I also play in the band. A lot of people know that. Thank you.
It's a symphony.
So, yes, the symphony.
Mhm.
And so I just want to walk down the street to the concert hall.
Understand?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other business you want to discuss? I move adjournment. Mr. Bourne, adjourned.
I'll move to adjourn.
I will second. Thank you. I love the dialogue and I love the